Welcome to the Creative Soul Healing Podcast. Here we talk about the connection between creativity and healing, and how we are creative and how creativity helps us heal mentally, physically, and emotionally. Join us now. Hi everyone, Larissa Russell of Creative You Healing, and today I have with me Jacob Nordby. Jacob is a celebrated author, speaker, and visionary artist who ignites the creative potential within individuals. He describes himself as a fascinated human who believes in love, laughter, and the restoration of joy. Love that. Known for his best-selling books, including the latest book, The Creative Cure, Jacob seeks to expand the meaning of creativity as he is convinced that everyone is creative and that this energy is meant to fill every part of life with aliveness. I fully believe that as well. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Larissa. I'm not sure who wrote that bio. I don't think I would have written visionary artist, but
But the bios are all about the things we probably wouldn't say about ourselves. So yeah.
yes, I'm so glad to be here. I was on your site ahead of this, and I just love the work you're doing in this world. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. You'll be really excited. We're doing a Healing with Love Summit coming up soon,
Yeah.
and about creativity, but also just diversity and sharing. So
Yeah.
I'm excited about that one. But that being said, for those who may not know you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do? Your version.
It feels like such a long story, as I'm sure yours is too. When I was 10 years old, I went out in the living room and said, I want to be a writer. And my parents, unlike a lot of people, my parents were very supportive. And they said, that'll be amazing. And then they said, um, now it's time to brush your teeth and go to bed. And I promptly forgot for about the next 30 years, more than 30 years, that early dream, Larissa, and found myself at 34 in the middle of a outwardly successful life, and also waking up every morning at 3 a.m. terrified and wondering why all of the things that I had created didn't feel good, I wasn't in alignment, and long story short, but I ended up in a shamanic initiation. I didn't know what a shaman was in 2007, and that really rattled me and showed me how far off of alignment I was. And the financial meltdown of 2008-9 came along and wiped everything out, and I had a chance to start all the way over. That sounds tidy and nice, but it wasn't. It was really scary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the last 15 years or so, however many years that's been, my math brain isn't working real well, have been this long process of creative recovery and healing and all of that. And so I just feel so grateful now to be sharing, as you do, what I feel like it's such an essential experience, which is reconnecting with our inner creative selves and expressing that in our lives. It is the medicine, as I see it, that this world needs and that we individually need.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I hear often is I'm not creative.
Yes.
And we're humans, we're creative. That's innate. But I think it's the fear of showing that creativity because it gets shut down in our culture, our society. What are ways that you help people explore that more?
Mm. Man, you just said everything. Like, oh, I'm like, this is getting so juicy already. I want to read something. Actually, a fellow Canadian. Do you know Toko Turner?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, just
Not
a brief.
personally, but yeah, the work.
Yeah, yeah. No, in my experience, she's a bit of a hermit, and I just love her work. I just got back from this writing retreat in Santa Fe with Anne Lamott and Julia Cameron and SARK, and I read this on stage, and it's something I read so often, but just a little bit here, and I feel like this speaks to what we're talking about. She says, I believe we have more than enough creativity to solve the problems of our times, but we have to make a perilous trek into the wilderness within to reclaim it. There is a stand of undeveloped jungle, a place of indigeneity within each of us that can never be domesticated. And it goes on from there, but she says, few make the trek into this creative wild because the path requires great vulnerability. To come into our true originality, we must surrender the layers of numbness we use to protect our hearts. So when you ask the work that I do, I feel like that's a lot of it, Larissa, is making it safe to begin putting down those layers of numbness. Because as I see it, our creativity it's the life force energy. It is our essential nature. And we get shut down early in life by socialization, by traumatic experiences, by the fear of rejection. Like you just said, it's not that we don't have it, it's that we become afraid to show it. And so helping people and myself go through this process over and over again of laying down the armor in safe spaces and then making it safer to take some of that back out into the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the whole idea of vulnerability, right, is it's not even something we really discuss, because even the concept seems too scary. And so what I personally try to do is to lead people into expressing and maybe not even realizing they're being vulnerable.
Yes.
Not so like open about it. They do recognize it. We can get into that deeper, but in the beginning it's more like let's just see what happens. Let's just allow. And I know writing is your passion. And how difficult was it for you to become truly vulnerable in your writing?
Very difficult, Larissa. And I want to just rewind just for a moment because you said so much good right there. I feel like words get in the way so much in our over left brain developed cultures. We focus on concepts like creativity, like vulnerability. And I love to do, as you're saying, like strip that back and go, let's forget about the word. Let's just do these things. And then maybe come along later and say, you're being creative right now. No, really, this is what it is. Yeah, that's what it is. So for me, I feel like I was given that tremendous gift of having everything turned upside down and broken and shaken out, back in 08, 09, because I didn't have a choice but to be vulnerable at that point. I think stepping into it intentionally can be a lot more difficult. I was just literally broken, and vulnerability was just a way of life. And so learning how then to invite people into that without necessarily needing the shattering experiences, I feel like that's a really big job.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really important thing that you just said there too, because often we move into our creativity, our
Mm,
dreams, our passions because of something big that makes us vulnerable.
yeah.
And and if we could do that without needing that big thing, maybe we could, bypass that big thing. Um, because I think spirit works with that, right? Like just we need to move forward and you're not doing it. So we're going to put this big thing in the way. So you need to do that. And as you opened up into your own vulnerability,
Mm.
how easy was it then to recognize that you needed to do something different as opposed to, I just need to fix what's broken over here?
Mm. Yes. I wouldn't say easy, but it felt necessary, Larissa. And knowing that, in recovery movements, they have the phrase, my best thinking got me here. So every time I would catch myself trying to go back to previous ways of being in the world, I realized that was the armor that I was wearing and it did not serve me. So I need to be willing to step into the unknown, into uncertainty, into awkwardness. And on the positive side, much like many wisdom traditions teach, the beginner's mind. How can I go back? My children are now all moved out of the house recently, actually. But we've talked, and I have told them that I had the great benefit of breaking and starting over with them before they were coming of age. And so we really grew up together. And because of that, I didn't have fixed notions of how the world was or how they should behave. And I don't know that I wouldn't have come to that on my own. It was that experience. And so I feel that for one thing, I'm straying away from the question you asked.
No, that's perfectly fine. I think the flow of conversation is an important part, and asking questions is just a way to open the door to what needs to be said.
Yeah.
So not to worry about that at all. I think as we work with people to uncover what they need to explore, it can be really tricky. And I know I've been talking to a number of healers and creatives lately about this resistance that we're facing right now with the polarization in the world. And people really want to move into creativity, intuition, love, all of the healing, all of these things. But it's like almost too scary, like you're bucking the system. Do you have any, I don't know, tips seems like too, but, you know, ways that people can help themselves start to move forward to what they really want?
Wow, Larissa, the poles, as you just talked about, those, the magnetic pole of either pole has grown so much more intense over the last 5 or 6 years, it feels to me, or maybe 10 years, I don't know, but it feels so intense right now. And I feel the pull myself, and I went through a transformational leadership program earlier this year and got the deep reminder of such an old phrase that says, what you resist persists. If I don't want more war in the world, if I go out and war against war, I'm actually creating more war. And so, and that sounds very simplistic, but it's really deep work. And as to your question, what I would suggest is ask the question, how can I be curious in the middle of this tension, in the middle of this feeling of urgency? How can I be curious? How can I, even in the safety of my own space, not trying to take this out into the world and change the world, how can I be curious about what I need, how I can serve, what life is calling me to? And I find that whenever I feel that heightened anxiety and getting into, oh no, I need to do something, this world's falling apart, if I'm willing to take a few deep breaths and sit quietly and ask some curious questions, and I offer this in my creative self journal practice, 3 questions. What do I need? How do I feel right now? What do I need right now? And then what would I love, or how would I love to feel? What would I love to create, depending upon the situation? Those questions often bring me back into that polyvagal green zone, into the feeling of groundedness and centeredness and creativity, in which solutions can come forward. So that's probably one very simple piece of advice, would be take a deep breath and ask oneself in the middle of this situation, how can I be curious? What's needed from me right now? What do I need right now?
Mm-hmm. I love that, because I think there's so much of I must pick a side, or I must do this thing because, and it's like, no, what do I need to be curious?
Yeah.
What do I need to find the answers for me, right? And not just follow because. And
Larissa, I would love to ask you a question about this, because I say that, and I live it, I teach it, and I know that there's a real need and calling at times for the firebrands, for the people who do come from that deep centered, soul centered place, and they speak out. So I'm not suggesting that we should turn our voices down. So I'm curious, how do you balance those?
well, I wasn't expecting that. It's a real struggle, because
Yeah.
as someone who knows, who has a connection with spirit,
Mhm.
who is very intuitive, like I really feel that within,
Yeah.
I don't always listen, right? And so I
Mm.
can be really good at sharing with other people. I use my voice a lot to help people move towards what they need. Do I always do it for my own self? No. And I'm really working on why am I not always doing it for my own self when I
Mhm.
know that that's the path? And I don't have all the answers yet, but a lot of it comes down to, for my own self, is ego, right? And how it gets in the way, because of the society we live in, because of the direction we've been pointed in. And so, and I don't mean ego as in vanity, but although that might be a small part of it, ego as in not listening and needing to, um, it's not the appearance, it's the show up
Mhm.
in a certain expected way,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And bucking the system is hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. And so I did that answer the question?
I didn't mean to ambush you.
You know,
I genuinely love conversation, and of course I have a lot to say, but I love to hear, and I sense that you are very much in alignment with a, what is the right action here? What is intuition actually speaking, or calling me forward into? And I believe in manifestos. I believe in the big fiery voices, and my God, we need them. And we need them to be, we need each one who feels called. We need that to come from the deep inner work. That means whatever comes forth is medicine.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think not enough people are recognizing their voice and their part in that, right? And so that comes with being vulnerable, as we started with. Yeah. The one question I do ask every guest is, what does healing with creativity mean to you?
Mm. So, my God, I love that question. For me, because I feel that creativity is the expression, it's the expression of that vital spark that we have, the divine spark, whatever we want to call it. To me, that is much like the soul as I see it. It can't be damaged, it can't be destroyed. Our connection to it. And you talked about the ego just a moment ago, and I love that you didn't treat the ego as an enemy. It's like a body. As long as we're here, we're each going to have an ego, and learning to work with it better. But the ego self that we create to protect ourselves and to operate in the world, often that connection to our soul self, to our inner creative self, gets so stretched out and full of static and damaged that, to me, that's the only thing that needs to be healed, is the connection. And so for me, it's so important, that I don't see them as siloed experiences, healing and creativity. I think a lot of people do, Larissa. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going to heal, and then once I'm healed, then I'll start creating, or I'm going to create, and healing kind of takes, to me, they're completely interlocked. You can't say we heal to create and we create to heal. And whether that, and by the way, I think that a lot of people make the mistake, and I'm sure you've heard this so many times. I'm not that creative. I heard that from my brother years ago when I was writing The Creative Cure first draft, and we were walking through this office that we had built together, and then he had been running, and it's tech and it's all this stuff, and he looked at me and said, "I'm just not that creative." And then we walked into his office, the rest, and he sat down in front of his desk, and he had 3 screens, and they all looked like the Matrix to me, all this code. But when he sat down, his posture changed. It was like watching a pianist sit down at the grand piano. And I watched him go into flow state almost instantaneously. He forgot I was there. And I put my hand on his shoulder and I said, "Brother, it's like watching Mozart work on a composition to see you at your desk right now." I said, "This to me, as I see it, is one of your creative expressions." He looked up, he said, "I've never thought of it that way." So if I can help people see that healing, that connection, means that we begin to see all of life as an opportunity for artfulness, whether it's cooking that dinner or cleaning up the back patio and planting flowers, or whatever it is, it can be artful, it can be creative.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with that. And I talk about it a lot because creativity is in everything we do. And I joke because I paint, but I also love spreadsheets, and I color
Yeah.
code them. I do all the things, and they just make me so happy. So I can get into that same state in a spreadsheet as I can in with my paint. So it's very, very similar. And many people want to think, oh, it's like writing a bestseller or playing in a symphony, or whatever it is, painting a masterpiece. But it's everything we do. It is who we are to be creative. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like to compare it to like a tree full of sap. If sap stops flowing through one of the limbs, or like our bodies, if blood stops flowing through any part of our body, that part starts to atrophy and die. And so, as I see it, one of my missions is to help people open those channels back up into every part of their lives, because that's what being in true health means. And by the way, healing, sometimes we forget what's, the hard work and the painful work of healing. The result of that process is health, it's joy. And I
Mhm.
think it can, when anyone begins to really embark on a healing journey, it can just feel like, oh my God, this is an endless, painful experience. And I can relate to that. But if we can remember that the real outcome of that is joy, it's health.
Yeah. Yeah. And not even needing to set out, like you said, to heal, right?
Yeah.
But when we can move into that space of creativity and what that is for us, the healing comes with that, right?
Yes.
The healing comes. Yeah. Wow. I think I could ask 100 more questions, but is there any final thoughts before we go today that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I would just like to ask, unless you're driving or doing something dangerous, if you can pause for a moment and just close your eyes and put your hand in your heart and take a breath with me. As you take that breath, allow your attention to notice the beating of your heart. And every beat of that heart to me is evidence of who you really are, of your creative nature. And I just want to say that the more that you tune into that and then share it with yourself and your family and your friends and your society, your community, the more you become medicine in this world. Thank you for being here.
Love that. Thank you. Might have to incorporate something like that at the end of every episode. I do. I want to thank you so much for being here today, and we will have links so that people know where to find you and how to get your offerings. And I think you have a lot to offer the world, and so I want to just thank you again for being here today.
It's a real honor, and when this episode is ready, I'll be so delighted to share it with everyone. Thank you for the work you're doing, Larissa.
Thank you. Thank you. To our listeners, we will see you again next time. And in the meantime, we wish for you amazingly creative days. Thank you for listening. If you found our podcast of interest, we'd love for you to leave a review wherever you listen in.